Hi, my name is Ted Wright, and I am here with Frank Turek, and we're from crossexamine.org, an apologetics ministry from the United States, and we are very excited to be here with Skywalk tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about apologetics, what it means to defend the faith. The Bible says we're commanded to defend the faith. In 2 Peter 3:15 says, "Always be ready to give an answer for the reason, the hope that's within you, but do this with meekness and truth." So tonight, Frank and I will be talking about defending the faith and what it means to defend your faith in a world that doesn't have faith. So we're very excited to be here, and we hope that you enjoy tonight's session.
Meget kendt verdenskendt apologet og debattør, har blandt andet debatteret mod Christopher Hitchens og andre, og han er utrolig dygtig inden for emnet apologetik, som han også kommer til at undervise omkring i dag. Det han kommer til at undervise omkring i dag, det er egentlig, hvordan vi forsvarer vores tro. Så han kommer til at give argumenter for troen, og kommer til at lære dig og udruste dig til, hvordan du er med til at forsvare din tro. Som rigtig mange personer siger nu om dagen, det er, at apologetik, som vi skal snakke om her i aften, det er simpelthen eller nutidens bedste måde, man kan se på, og det er den måde, som vi skal være med til at nå vores samfund på, og det kommer han også til at sætte endnu flere ord på. Samtidig også, så skal I også regne med, at det kommer til at blive på engelsk, så jeg håber, I kan følge med, og jeg håber, det er okay, ellers er nogen af jer har fået oversættelse, og jeg håber, det går dermed. Samtidig også, så kommer det her til at være en time først, så kommer det til at være et kvarters pause, hvor der vil være mulighed for jer at købe drikkevarer ud i caféen, hvorefter der så vil være spørgsmål og svar herinde. Og det, der vil ske, det er simpelthen, at spørgsmålene, I skriver bare alle spørgsmål til mit telefonnummer, så hvis I ikke har det, så kan I desværre ikke være med. Det er en joke. Men der vil komme et telefonnummer op i pausen, hvor I kan skrive til, og hvor I kan skrive de sms'er imens, og så vil vi vælge imellem dem. Og simpelthen grund til, at vi ikke sender mikrofonen rundt, er, fordi at, der sikkert kommer rigtig, rigtig mange spørgsmål, så vi er lidt nødt til at sortere i det. Så jeg håber, det er okay. Er det i orden? Godt. Så vent med spørgsmålet. De kommer til næste efter pausen. Så nu vil vi bare give ordet over til Frank, og så skal han nok give den max gas. So Frank, get up here, my friend, wherever you are.
Why, thank you, Jasper. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Talk. That's all I know. And hi. Hi, talk. My friend and colleague Ted Wright will be up here in just a few minutes, but what are we doing here? What do you guys think we're here for? Jesus! Is he here? Yeah. There's at least one Christian in the room. Well, I hope we're going to have a bit of a discussion tonight. But before we have a discussion, I just need to say a few things. And what I'm going to say might be controversial, so it's absolutely critical that you listen closely. Because if you don't listen closely, you may walk out of here thinking I said something I did not say, and I don't want that to happen. If you don't listen closely, the results can be disastrous. We need sound. Sound. Oh, we got to start over. You got to get all the German there. Let's start over. Stand by. You guys ready? Here we go.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Wissenschafters. Das ist das Überlebensradar. Mayday, Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Are you ready to listen closely? I took a little German when I was in high school, and I learned a few words. What's the word for pen again?
Kugelschreiber.
Kugelschreiber! You can say Kugelschreiber, or you can say pen. It's much easier. All right, since we don't have the computer up here, I'm going to shout commands back to the back. Go to slide 410. There you go. That's impressive, isn't it? Okay, the first question I want to ask you is, what is the purpose of your life? This is the interactive portion of the program. Why are we here on earth? Jesus, where's Jesus? He's in here. I heard him before. Jesus, where are you? Oh, now he's quiet. We ask him a tough question and suddenly he's hiding under the chair. Why are we here? I mean, what's the purpose of life? To live. That's the purpose of life. Well, no, ants live. Yes, sir.
To honor God.
To honor God. How do we know that? Who said?
From the Bible.
From the Bible. How do we know the Bible's true? Yes, ma'am.
Because we've seen it and felt it.
We've seen what and felt it?
Well, miracles.
We've seen miracles. Well, that would be an indication that God exists, but yes, ma'am, in the back. Go ahead. Okay, there are prophecies from the Bible. What prophecy might you say is a good prophecy to help people believe that the Bible's true? Shall I ask Jesus? Jesus, where are you? A good prophecy from the Bible. Jesus has suddenly gotten stupid. Come on, Jesus. But you're right, prophecies, but we want to have some that we can offer. He did come to earth, but how do we know that's true? Faith. Is that a good reason to believe, just because you have faith? Well, now we got some witnesses. We have some historical witnesses. Okay, that's good. And if these witnesses are telling the truth, that what went on in the Bible really happened, then okay, then we've got some evidence here. In fact, we're going to look at some of that evidence today, just briefly, but I really want to talk more about how you can defend your faith. And Jesus is fired up again over there. That's quite good. I mean, honor God, is that really the purpose of life? What is the purpose of life? Is life just a glorified Monopoly game? You get a whole bunch of stuff now, but when the game is over, it's all going to go back in the box? Is that really the purpose of life? If atheism's true, that is the purpose of life. One day you die, and everything you've accomplished, really, everything you've acquired, everything just goes back in the box. In fact, one preacher to his congregation put it this way. He said, one day you are going to die. And they're going to put you in your best suit or your best outfit. They're going to put you in a box. They're going to dig a hole somewhere. They're going to lower that box into the hole. Then they're going to throw dirt in your face and go back to the church and eat potato salad. Is that it? You just take a dirt nap for all eternity? There is no real purpose to life? I think there is a real purpose to life. And you can find that purpose in that little book. Well, it's actually quite a big book. We now call the Bible. And there's only 4 questions you need to answer to show that the Bible is true. In other words, if you answer yes to these 4 questions, you can show beyond any reasonable doubt that the Bible is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Extremely Skywalk inspiring music, isn't it? That is actually from our TV show, which you can't see here in Denmark, but you can watch it on your computer if you go to our website right there, crossexamine.org, at those times. So here, right now, that would be 2 o'clock in the morning on Thursday morning. Or it could be at 6 o'clock in the morning on Thursday morning if you want to watch it on Wednesdays. What you do is you go to the website and you click on TV and you can watch our program called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I'm on it, Ted is on it, who you'll meet here in a few minutes. And what we do is we provide evidence for Christianity. We cross-examine ideas against it. We also have a radio program that you can get via podcast or you can get via our new app, which I'll tell you about here in a minute. Now, why are these the four questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. Well, if there is no truth, then quite obviously the Bible can't be true, right? If it's just true for you but not for me, or all truth is relative, or there are no absolutes, then this book can't be true. Of course, if there is no truth, then any book written by an atheist can't be true either, right? Of course there's truth. We'll talk about it very briefly. Second question, does God exist? You can't have a word from God if there's no God. If there's no God, throw the Bible away and every other book that talks about God. But there really is some very good evidence that there is a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator out there. You don't even need the Bible to get this evidence. In fact, the evidence that we've been through in several occasions here in Denmark so far shows that there are two scientific arguments that you can give and one philosophical argument that shows that this being actually exists. And in fact, I'll briefly talk about them tomorrow night at the debate. The third question is, are miracles possible? Obviously, the Bible can't be true if miracles are not possible. But the truth is, the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and we have scientific evidence for it. And we'll talk about that briefly here tonight as well. And then thirdly, is the New Testament true? The New Testament can't be true if there's no truth, no God, no miracles, right? But if truth, God, and miracles are possible, or if there is truth and God does exist and miracles are possible, then we can see if we have an accurate, historically reliable account of miracles occurring in the first century to a man named Jesus and his apostles in the 27 handwritten Greek manuscripts we've put under one binding we now call the New Testament. If those people really told the truth and they were eyewitnesses, then the entire Bible is true. How could the entire Bible be true if just the New Testament is historically reliable? How so? Anybody? Who in the New Testament can authenticate or tell us the truth about the Old Testament? Who has the authority to do that? Jesus. And he's here. Jesus. If Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, now that's a big if, but if he is God, whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament is the Word of God, so if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Now, in our book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, we spent over 400 pages giving you the evidence as to why this is true. We don't have time to do that here tonight. Okay? All I want to do is just show you how you can dialogue with people on these issues. If you get the book, it's going to be helpful. But you don't necessarily have to have the book or memorize everything in it. I don't have everything memorized in it. In order to have a good conversation and in order to bring somebody closer to Christ. How many people in here have an iPhone or a Droid device or an iPad? Okay? If you do, you're going to be equipped. Because we have what's called an app, the Cross-Examined app, that will help you actually... Uh-oh, I got to get Wi-Fi down here. Do we have Wi-Fi down here?
Def info.
Def info. Stand by for vectors, Victor. Call for clearance, Clarence. Roger, Roger. Talk awkwardly amongst yourselves. Oh, I don't have def info here. I have def lid. Contour? Is it the same password? It's bad in here. The Wi-Fi's not good in here. Oh, we don't want people surfing the internet while the guy's preaching. I understand.
You need some code for the net?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Hey, see? It does work in here. So they don't trust Jesper. What does he know anyhow? Come on. Anyway, in there is an app. And the key to defending your faith, or the key to interacting with others, is to ask questions. Jesus asked questions. What happened when people try to put Jesus on the spot? What would he do? He'd ask a question. And what always happened after he asked a question? The other people, go ahead. They stopped asking after a while because they were trying to trap him, but he knew how to ask a question back that really trapped them. Now, you're not trying to trap people when you're asking questions.
Do not signal in this room.
There's no signal.
Oh, there's no signal. Okay, thank you very much. Well, okay, forget my entire presentation then. Anyway, no, we don't have to have it there. But the app talks about some of these questions that you can ask people when you're having a conversation about a spiritual issue. And Jesus did that quite a bit. Here are 3 questions you need to get used to asking. And these questions you can use for any topic, not just Christianity, okay? And for those of you that ever watch American TV, this is Lieutenant Columbo. Has anyone ever seen the show Columbo? Anyone in here? Lieutenant Columbo, it was a TV detective who didn't look like he could reason his way out of a paper bag, right? He'd show up at a crime scene and he'd kind of be walking around going, gee, I don't even know what's going on here, right? And then just before he's about to leave, it didn't look like he could even solve any crime. He'd say, there's one thing that bothers me about this thing here. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? And he'd start asking questions. And before you know it, in 42 minutes, he would solve the entire crime, right? Well, Columbo was good at asking questions. And here are questions you need to ask. Well, before I tell you what the questions are, can anybody in here give me a statement that somebody you know who's a non-Christian has said to you that you didn't know how to answer? Or can you give me a question they've asked you that you didn't quite know how to answer? Somebody volunteer.
There's no God because of all the bad things that happen.
Okay, excellent. There is no God because there's so many bad things that have happened. So this good God couldn't exist. This should be your first question back. What you don't want to do is you don't want to start giving the person evidence that he's wrong. Because when somebody says something, it is not your job to refute or tell them why they're wrong. It is that person's job to tell you why they're right. So you need to ask some questions. So somebody says, I can't believe in God because there's too much evil in the world, right? Here's your first question. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by evil? Now, what might somebody say, do you think? If you ask that question back, what do you mean by evil? What might they say? What have you heard?
War.
What's that? War. Okay, there's war. That's a good one. What else? Sickness. Poverty. Genocide, absolutely. Death. Human trafficking, evil. What else? Well, that's enough. Has anybody given me a definition of evil yet? No? What have you just done? You've given me examples of evil, but not a definition of evil. I want a definition. Sin? Well, yeah, that's a kind of a broad category. But I want a definition. I don't want you to give me examples. I want you to tell me what evil is. If you look it up in a dictionary, what does it say? It doesn't say poverty. It doesn't say war. It doesn't say sex trade. What does it say? If you look at a good dictionary. Yes, go ahead.
I'm not sure about the dictionary, but I know that some people, they say it's the absence of good.
There you go. You're getting much closer. The absence of good. Did you hear that over there? It's actually more than the absence of good. It is a lack in good. In fact, let's go back 1,600 years. The great church theologian and philosopher Augustine had a problem. Here was his problem. He said, God created all things. Evil is a thing, therefore God created evil. He said, how could this be? How could God create evil? That would make God evil. And if those two premises are true, God created all things and evil is a thing, it follows logically that God created evil. But Augustine realized that the second premise of the argument wasn't true. Evil is not a thing. As you said, evil is a lack in a thing. Or evil is a lack in good. Evil, I'll give you some definitional examples of evil. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of the car, you got a better car. If you take all the car out of the rust, you've got nothing. You see, evil doesn't exist on its own. Evil is like rot in a tree. If you take all the rot out of the tree, you got a better tree. If you take all the tree out of the rot, you've got nothing. Evil is like a wound in your head. If you take the wound out of your head, you got a better head. If you take the head out of your wound, you're headless. You've got nothing. Okay? So in other words, evil does not exist on its own. It only exists as a lack, or it's the technical term called privation in good. Okay, so you ask the question, what do you mean by that? If you finally arrive at the right definition, that it is a lack in good, what does that imply? You might ask the next question, what is good? Right? What is good? If the person is an atheist and says, there can't be a good God because there's too much evil in the world, what do they mean by good then? You see, in order for evil to exist, good must exist. But in order for good to exist, God has to exist. Why? Why is that? Because without God, everything's just a matter of opinion. There is no real good if there's no God. It's just your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. But if God exists, if he is the standard of good, then anything that deviates from his nature would be evil. So when the person brings up evil, he's actually proving God exists. In fact, C.S. Lewis knew this. C.S. Lewis said he thought there was too much injustice in the world. And then that's why he was an atheist. And finally, one day it all came to him. He said, wait a minute. Injustice. How did I come to this idea of injustice? He says, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of cruel and unjust? He said, a man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You see, in order for there to be injustice, what does there need to be? Justice. So evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but it doesn't disprove God. So when somebody says there's too much evil in the world, you just have to ask at least one question to see what they say. Now, it turns out that that particular objection you just brought up is in the app, and I'll show it to you here in a minute. And the reason I'm showing it to you here because nobody can remember all this stuff. So if you have it with you on your phone or you have it with you on your iPad, you don't have to remember it all. Somebody brings something up, you go, hold on. You call up your iPad or your iPhone and you can ask the person a question back. By the way, the second question, whenever you're discussing something, again, this is on any topic, after you figure out what do you mean by that, the second question is, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that conclusion? Or you can say it a different way, what evidence do you have for that? Because I can almost guarantee you this, 95%, or probably more than that, probably 99 times out of 10, when people say things that are opposed to the Christian faith, they have no idea what they're talking about. They think that they understand the problem, but they really don't. You know what they've done? They've heard a slogan, and they like the slogan, and so they adopt it and think it's true. They don't even know if there's any evidence behind the slogan. And that's what people do. In order to create a worldview, they've got all these slogans that they've adopted, and they just kind of sloganize their way through life. Like, for example, some might say, well, I can't believe the Bible. It's been changed throughout the centuries. That's like a slogan, right? Your first question is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean it's been changed throughout the centuries? 99 times out of 10, people will say, well, you know, the Bible was given to him, who gave it to him, who gave it to him, who gave it to her, gave it to him, gave it to her. By the time it got down here to Jesper, he had no idea what the original was like. And they think that's the way the Bible was transmitted. Well, it wasn't transmitted like that. We take all the extant or all the Greek manuscripts that are still out there, we compare them to one another, and we can recreate the original with 99.5% accuracy, right into English or into Danish or whatever translation we want. But most people don't know that. So if you ask, what do you mean by that, they're probably going to give you the wrong analysis or the wrong fact, the slogan. When you ask the second question, how do you come to that conclusion? They're not going to know what they're talking about either. I mean, if you wanted to customize this question for that particular problem, you might say, how did you come to that conclusion? Have you investigated the manuscript evidence for yourself? How many people are going to say, yeah, you know, just last night I was reading about the Byzantine line of manuscripts? Nobody is going to do that. You see, before somebody is going to accept your worldview, they have to start doubting their worldview first. So you need to plant a few seeds of doubt about what they believe before you start trying to ask them to consider Christianity. Now, the last question that you can ask somebody is if you have something to say back to them that might be evidence to counter their view. And you started out by saying this. It's a nice way to offer evidence. You say, have you ever considered that the Bible was not transmitted from one person to another person to another person to another person like the telephone game? That eyewitnesses wrote it down and then copies were made of what they wrote down, and we can take those copies and put them right into our own language. And so you can use that for anything. In fact, how many parents do we have in here with teenagers? I see some parents out here. Parents? Okay, you can use this with your kids. So suppose you get a phone call from one of your kids one night and you want them in at 11 p.m. and they call up and they say, Mom, Dad, sorry, I'm not going to be in at 11 tonight. I'm not going to make curfew. Your first question should be, what do you mean by that? What do you mean you're not going to be in by 11? And how did you come to that conclusion? And then you can say, have you ever considered that if you're not home by 11, you're grounded for 2 weeks? Be right there, Dad! Now, I warn you, men, is there any men in here who are married? Married men, never, I repeat, never use these questions with your wife. Never. Because I'm telling you, if your wife calls you an idiot and you say, what do you mean by that? She is going to have a list of idiotic things you've done since the day you met. Okay, so never try it with your wife. Got it? Now, your initial goal with somebody, we might say, is to put a stone in their shoes. You don't have to bring everybody to the foot of the cross every time. All you need to do is get them to consider maybe what they're believing is wrong, and then maybe possibly consider something that you have to say that could be right. Just put a stone in their shoes. Well, Paul talked about this as planting seeds. Some plant, some water, God gives the increase. So you're just moving the conversation along. I was telling some of my friends here that a friend of mine, Nabil Qureshi, who is the son of Pakistani parents who were Muslims. In fact, they were sort of raised in Muslim apologetics to try and show that Islam is true. And my friend Nabil came to the United States and he went to college. And he went to Old Dominion University in Virginia. And he ran into a Christian by the name of David Wood, who was a bit of a Christian apologist. And they began to have a dialogue. And this was the first guy Nabil had ever run into who could answer his objections to Christianity. And their dialogue went on for 7 years. Nabil became a medical doctor. He went to medical school and was a doctor. And so one night, David's been planting seeds in him for years. And then one night, Nabil is in Orlando, Florida. He's in a hotel room and he's struggling. He's trying to figure out whether Allah is God or whether Jesus is God. And so he says, whoever you are, I need to know who you are. Can you please give me a sign? Now, he's in his hotel room. It's night, but it's not totally dark. He said, suddenly the entire room went pitch black. And I saw on the wall 100 crosses. They just kind of lit up the wall. And this went on for 5 or 6 seconds. I saw these crosses. And then it was over. And the light came back. I said, Nabil, did you believe right then? He said, no. It's so typical of us, isn't it? God, if you show me a sign, I'll believe. And then he does, and we go, no, forget it. I need more. Okay? So I said, well, what happened then? He said, well, I started to pray for more dreams and visions. And so I had another dream, and that wasn't as specific as I wanted it to be. And so then I asked him for another dream, and here's the dream I had. He said, I was in a doorway. Now he's asleep now. This is not a vision. This is a dream. I was in a doorway, and my friend David was standing in front of me, and I could see beyond him was, this is a doorway into a big banquet hall. There was a banquet going on. And I said, David, I need to get in. Let me through. And David said, you never responded to the invitation. And then he woke up. He called David immediately. He said, David, here's the dream. What does it mean? David said, go to Luke chapter 13. So he goes to Luke chapter 13, and in his Bible, the heading for this section was, Enter by the narrow door. And it is the story of trying to get into a banquet, which is supposed to be heaven, and those that don't answer the invitation don't get in. And so David said, this dream is God telling you that Jesus is God. I said, Nabil, had you ever read that chapter in the Bible before? He said, no, I never read the Bible to read it. I only read it to try and find contradictions in it so I could nail David with them. But when I read that, I knew God had sent me a real sign. Now, this again had been going on for 7 years. David Wood didn't just talk to him for 10 minutes and suddenly becomes a Christian. This goes on and on and on. This is a process. And of course, for a Muslim like Nabil, it took a lot of courage to become a Christian because his family has basically disowned him. Now, he just wrote a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. And you can get that book online. You can hear our conversation if you get the app. It was the last show we did, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. Now, if you download this app, here's what you're going to find. Remember we just talked about the 4 questions you need to know? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. That's the positive case for Christianity. If you can provide evidence there is truth, there is God, miracles are possible, and the New Testament is true, then Christianity is true. And some of the evidence is in the app. Let's briefly talk about it just like in 5 minutes. Does truth exist? If somebody says there is no truth, what question should you ask them? Is that true? Is it true that there is no truth? Because if it's true that there is no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true, right? You can see when somebody says there are no absolutes, what should you ask them? Are you absolutely sure? See, because you're making an absolute truth claim. Somebody says all truth is relative. What should you say to them? Ask them a question. What question should it be? Is that a relative truth, right? You see, that's an absolute truth. You see, people can't make truth claims without making absolute truth claims. Even if they try and say all truth is relative, that's an absolute truth claim. So you can't get away from absolute truth. It's out there. It's self-defeating to say there is. If somebody says you ought not judge, what should you say? Then why are you judging me for judging? See, that's a judgment. Jesus didn't say don't judge. What did Jesus say? What did he say in Matthew chapter 7? Are you guys Christians? Is Jesus here? Maybe he could tell us. What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 7? But he didn't stop with don't judge others. What did he say? He said, judge not lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you'll be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to judge. He's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. He's simply saying get the log out of your own eye first. So this is not a command not to judge, it's a command on how to judge. Everybody makes judgments. Christians make judgments. Muslims make judgments. Atheists make judgments. Atheists say there's no God. That's a judgment. Atheists says they say there is no morality or objective morality. That's a judgment. Atheists say Christians are wrong. That's a judgment. Jesus actually says in John chapter 7, verse 24, he says, "Stop judging by mere appearances and make a right judgment." Hey, by the way, have you ever heard anyone say, "Oh, that person is such a saint. He's never said a bad word about anyone"? Have you ever heard somebody say that? If that's the definition of a saint, Jesus was no saint. Why? Have you ever read Matthew chapter 23? What does Jesus say in Matthew chapter 23? He's talking to the Pharisees, who were the religious and political leaders of Israel at the time. What does he say to them? Well, he's not very nice. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make him a convert, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell?" Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney, okay? He was not skipping around saying, "Love your neighbor" all the time. I mean, he said that a lot, but most of the time, he was very direct with people, and he told them the truth, even if it was so direct that they went, "Oh." I don't know how we got this idea that Jesus was a soft soap person who never said a bad word about anyone. Jesus was direct. Now, he wasn't unnecessarily unkind, but he told the truth, and we need to tell the truth as well. Now, we have to judge without being judgmental, and the Pharisees were judgmental, so Jesus went after them. You know what the attitude we need to have is with unbelievers? Somebody put it this way: evangelism is just one beggar showing another beggar where the food is. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But that doesn't mean we shy away from truth. We tell people the truth. Now, the second question, does God exist? We're going to talk about that tomorrow night at the debate, so I won't get into that here. If you want to see some evidence for God tomorrow night, we'll do it. One of the evidences I'll briefly mention is that the universe exploded into being out of nothing, which means that whatever caused the universe is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Well, that's exactly what we mean by God, a spaceless, timeless, immaterial first cause. The third question is, are miracles possible? What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? The resurrection. People always say the resurrection. No, the resurrection's easy compared to the greatest miracle in the Bible. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? What's that? Yes, the resurrection, but it's big, but it's not as big as the greatest miracle. Yeah, somebody said it, the creation of the world. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible. Well, we now have good scientific and philosophical evidence that we'll talk about tomorrow that the first verse is true. Well, if God can create the universe out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible inside the universe? Well, of course. A God can create the universe out of nothing. Can he resurrect Jesus from the dead or Lazarus from the dead? Of course. A God can create the universe out of nothing. Can he walk on water? Can he make axe heads float in water if he can create the universe out of nothing? Can he do the Jonah miracle? You know, people have a lot of trouble with the Jonah miracle. You notice that? How could you believe in Jonah and the whale or Jonah and the great fish? I have no problem at all believing in that. For God can create the whole universe out of nothing, he can't do the fish-man deal? I mean, that's easy. Well, we have good evidence that the first verse is true, so maybe the other verses are true. And then the New Testament. How do we know the New Testament's true? There's early testimony in the New Testament. There's eyewitness testimony in the New Testament. There's embarrassing testimony, things they wouldn't have made up, like saying that they all ran away while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. No man would ever admit that. No man would make that up. It's too embarrassing. They wouldn't have put two prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline if they were making it up. Who are the two prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline? Rahab and Tamar. Do you think Matthew and Luke one day are sitting around going, you know what, we need to spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. No, they're not doing that. In fact, there's an adulterer in the bloodline too, Bathsheba. And then there's an adulterer, a murderer, and a liar, the king, David, in the bloodline of the Messiah. Do you think they made that up? You don't see this in any other ancient history. Ted will tell you, Ted's an historian. You don't see the Egyptians talking about how the Pharaoh did immoral things or had immoral, embarrassing things going on in his life, because the historian for the Pharaoh would have his head chopped off if he tried to say something embarrassing about the Pharaoh. But if you look at the Bible records all the warts, all the sins, all the embarrassing details of all their supposed heroes. Why? Because they're telling the truth. But if they were making it up, they never would say that. Also, there's excruciating testimony. These people die for what they said they saw. Yes, I know today people die, like there's Muslim martyrs out there, but they haven't seen anything. They can't prove Islam is true. But the New Testament martyrs, they were there. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. You see, many people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament martyrs were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they all went to their graves because they said Jesus had risen from the dead. They certainly didn't make up the New Testament story. What motive would they have to make up a new religion? Remember, these people were Jews. What motive would they have? We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah, what's it going to get us? Well, it'll get us excommunicated from the synagogue, and then we'll get beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. What a great idea. Why haven't we thought of this new religion thing earlier? No. There's even extra biblical testimony out there. What do I mean by that? Well, there's archaeological discoveries, but there is also non-Christian writers who talk briefly about Jesus and the apostles. And when you add up their non-Christian references, you get a story very close to what the New Testament says. These people don't say they believe Jesus rose from the dead, but they say the disciples believe they rose from the dead, or he rose from the dead, and his disciples were willing to die for their belief. Look, if these non-Christian writers said they believed Jesus had risen from the dead, they would have been Christians. But they're simply saying the disciples believed that and went to their deaths. There are other reasons as well. But let me talk about this app briefly, and then we're going to get to your questions. When you get this app, if you look across the top here, I'm going to come over here to this side because it's hard to see. You can see there's the truth button, there's the God miracles, and there's the Bible right here. And if you click on those buttons, you're going to get a whole bunch of different questions or evidence that you can provide back to the individual you're talking to. This last one, 4 E's, are the 4 major objections you're going to get to Christianity. People ask, well, do you get the same questions over and over again? Yes. And they come in one of these 4 categories. You can see them: evolution, evil, ethics, and eternity. In fact, today at the gymnasium, we got a question in evolution, a question on evil, and a question about eternity. I don't know if we got one on ethics. Did we, Jesper? Sure. I don't think we did. Oh, no, we did, on slavery. We got all 3 of them. Oh, all 4 of them, all 3 of them. Yes, I'm from America. All right. You know, there are 3 kinds of people out there: those that can count and those that can't. Some of you will get that tomorrow. All right? So the point here is that if you get this app, you're going to have a way to communicate your faith in an effective way without having to memorize a lot of stuff, because you're going to always have your phone with you. So let's say that you're talking to somebody and they have an objection to Christianity on, say, eternity. So you click on eternity, and it drills down a little further. As you can see here are the questions that the eternity section has. Why is Jesus the only way? How can you believe Jesus is the only way? What about those that have never heard about Jesus? Will God send me to hell just because I don't believe in Jesus? In fact, we got that question today. I'll explain that answer here in a minute. Will people have a second chance after death? This one says, why is there infinite punishment in hell for finite sins? Don't you think that's a little overkill? You know, why is that? And then why won't God just annihilate people rather than send them to hell? So these questions are right there in your app. Let's talk about the one we got today. There was a gentleman at the gymnasium today who said, look, I'm an atheist. He said, if I continue to be an atheist and I die, will God send me to hell? And he smiled. Like, oh, this is going to be tough. So, how would you answer that as a Christian? Absolutely, turn or burn immediately. Is that the way you do it? No. We don't advise that. How would you answer that? Say again? Yes, you are exactly right, ma'am. That is a very good statement. She said, you chose where you want to go. Because it's true. So the first question I asked him back, and this is the question, by the way, that's in the app. It's under the truth section. It says the most important question you should ask, other than the ones I just mentioned. You know, what do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? Have you ever considered? Here's the question you should ask all unbelievers. Are you ready? Give me your money. No, that's not it. That's sorry, that's not it. Yes, right. Here's the question. Is Jesus here? He's probably very disappointed in me right now. Here's the question you should ask all unbelievers, and this is the question I asked him today. I said, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? Now, what did he say, Jesper?
He said yes, actually.
Well, he did eventually. Yeah. The first thing he said was, you couldn't do that. Well, he sounded really open, didn't he? He eventually said, yes, I would. I said, good. Because if there's an afterlife, there's only two possible destinations. You're either going to be with God or you're not going to be with God. Those are logically the only two possibilities, if there is a God and if there is an afterlife. And so I said to him, to your question, will God send me to hell just because I don't believe in Jesus? The answer is, God will not force you into heaven against your will. What? Yeah, you see, the assumption is everybody wants to go to heaven. That's not true. Who's in heaven? Jesus is in heaven. People are running from Jesus right now. They don't want him. Why is God going to force himself on them? If they don't want Jesus now, they're not going to want him in eternity. Now, 2 points here. First point, I didn't mention to this kid today, but first point is this. You don't go to hell just because you don't believe in Jesus. You go to hell because you sin. It would be like saying you die because you didn't go to the doctor. No, you don't die because you didn't go to the doctor. You die because you have a disease. Now, maybe you could prevent dying by going to a doctor. That's true. And the same is true with Jesus. You could prevent eternal death by going to the great physician, the great doctor. But the reason you're going to hell is because you've sinned. You can avoid that by going to the doctor. But you don't go to hell just because you don't believe in Jesus. You go to hell because you've sinned. Then I asked the ladies in the audience this question. I'll ask you ladies here, because here's another way you can communicate this to people. Ladies, have you ever had a young man, or maybe an old man, oh, that's creepy. Okay. Have you ever had a young man pursue you whom you did not want to date? Ooh, ladies are going, yeah, that's right. I asked this at the University of Michigan once, and all these ladies were going, yeah, absolutely. And one lady said, yes. I said, is he sitting next to you right now? Meanwhile, whenever I ask that question, the ladies always smile and go, yeah, and the men start going, is she looking at me? Is she looking at me right now? Of course, that happens. Now, suppose this man continues to ask you out, and it gets to the point where he's asked you out a number of times, and you finally say, look. I like you, but only as a friend. Every man has heard this. Ladies, why don't you just stick the knife in and turn it? Because every man has heard the old friend rejection. Yeah, sure. Like me as a friend. That's it. It's over. Well, suppose he doesn't take the hint. He keeps pursuing you. He keeps pursuing you. He keeps pursuing you. And he finally gets to the point where he says, look, I love you so much, I'm going to force you to love me. Can he do that? No. Love, by definition, must be freely given. You can't force anyone to love you. Love has to be free, has to be freely given. Well, this is what happens. Well, let me ask you a question, ladies. If he truly did love you, what would he do if you didn't want him? What would he do?
Go away.
Yeah, go away. He would leave you alone. That's what God does for us. He sends us cards, letters, and flowers. He says, here I am through creation, through conscience, through the Bible, through other believers, through special signs on occasion. He says, look, here I am. If you want me, I'm here. I love you. Do you love me? If you say, no, I don't, and you continue to run away, God says, I'm going to leave you alone. And that's ultimately what hell is. It's separation from God. Heaven is with God. Hell is separation from God. Now, the Bible uses all sorts of metaphors for hell. Like it uses burning and fire on one hand and outer darkness and a bottomless pit on another. Well, how can you have darkness and fire together? You can't. They're metaphors, but they're meant to communicate destruction. And it's not some place you want to go. But if you choose to go there, you won't want to get out of it, because the only other alternative is to be with Jesus. In fact, you want to know what hell is like? In addition to these metaphors in the Bible, it describes it as separation from God. Think about, every human being out here has some positive grace from God in their lives. In other words, believers or unbelievers experience some of the goodness of God. They experience creation. They experience conscience. They experience the good things that God gives us, whether it's food, whether it's relationships, whether it's love. They experience all these things whether they're Christians or not. Now imagine a place that has none of that. Imagine a place where there's no beauty, where there's no relationship, where there's no love, where there's nothing but stone cold narcissism. It's just self-absorption. That's hell. And that's the road most of us are on if we're not accepting what Christ has done for us. We're moving towards self-absorption. So you can ask questions by just clicking on your app. All right? And there's many other questions we could deal with. But for those, we want to get to your questions, and so I'm going to have Ted Wright come up. Ted is our executive director at Cross-Examined. Ladies and gentlemen, Ted Wright. Yeah.
We're going to do a break.
What?
Let's do a break.
Oh, we're going to do a break? Well, then you come up, Jesper.
Okay,
thanks for throwing me the curveball.
Well, I thought you already knew, but it's fine.
No, I didn't,
Okay.
because you didn't tell me.
Oh, yeah,
There you go.
yes, I did. You just forgot. Okay, fine. Okay, det vi gør nu, som sagt, er, at der lige bliver 10 minutters pause, og bagefter så vil der være mulighed for at stille alle de spørgsmål, som I har lyst til. Simpelthen, så vi lige kan få kontrol over det, så vi er simpelthen nødt til at gøre det med telefonnummer, så kan I ikke lige smide det op her. Og så kommer det bare til at stå i pausen. I kan gå ud og tage noget drik, og så tager vi den derfra. Okay, 10 minutter ind, så fortsætter det her. Cool. Okay, are people ready? Okay, guys, thank you so much for all the questions, and we'll just dig right into it. What we're going to do is that first Tim is, just kidding, just Ted is going to tell us, we have an inside joke that I'm keep calling him Tim, it's just a joke. But Ted will just start out telling us who he is, what he's doing, and why he's come to Denmark also.
First of all, my name is Ted.
Yeah, sorry.
And the first thing I want to say is I don't have enough faith to be Frank Turek.
There you go.
I was tried.
You tried.
I tried.
That's good.
My name is Ted Wright, and I'm the executive director of CrossExamined.org. And I've been working for CrossExamined for about 2 years now, not quite 2 years. And one of the things that I do is I speak along with Frank around America. And last year before last, actually, I went to Norway, just right down right down the road from you, and spoke at the University of Oslo. And we also arrange and coordinate an event we have every year in the United States called the Cross-Examined Instructors Academy. We call it CIA for short. And basically, it is 3 days of intensive training to train you on how to do Christian apologetics in America. So we do all kinds of things at Cross-Examined. We have our app. We have our new website actually just launched today. So if you go to crossexamined.org, it is our newly refreshed website. We're very excited about it. So please go and check it out whenever you have time. We have a video of the day, video of the month usually on there. We have articles on it as well. You can also read about our Israel trip coming up with Frank in June. All kind of events that we do at Cross-Examined. So please go there and check it out for more resources besides the app. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you again for all the questions. It's great. And there's also been somebody who wants to know how old you are, but we'll wait for that for later. And somebody who wants to be friends with me, and we're going to talk about that afterwards. But there's a pretty good chance because I'm in lack of them, so it's fine. The first question is it's actually about Islam and Buddhism, for that matter. It says that the Quran also talks about miracles and about that they have seen Allah. And how can you know they're not telling the truth? How can you not know that Islam is true or Buddhism is true? How do we know that Christianity is true?
Faith. No, that's
Thank you.
not
Next
it.
question. Yeah.
Wrong
Actually, the Quran does not talk about miracles at all. In fact, Muhammad was asked to do miracles, and he said, I don't do miracles. The only miracle I give you is the Quran. Well, if writing a book makes you a miracle worker, I've done 4 miracles. The miracles in Islam are not attributed to Muhammad until over 150 years after his death in what is known as the Hadith, the written traditions of what Muhammad said and did. And even Muslim scholars agree many of the so-called miracles are legendary with regard to Muhammad. Muhammad does things that Jesus did, only in a bigger way. Like Jesus feeds 5,000, Muhammad feeds 50,000. Jesus turns water into wine, Muhammad turns water into milk. You know, and there are some odd miracles in there, like mountains salute Muhammad, wolves salute Muhammad. I don't know how that happens, but in any event, there is no eyewitness testimony of Muhammad ever doing a miracle. These are legend, they're much later. And the reason that I think Christianity is true is because the evidence shows that Jesus rose from the dead. The Quran comes along 650 years later and says Jesus never died. When even skeptical scholars, even a guy like Bart Ehrman, who's one of the most skeptical scholars in America, who's basically an atheist, says it's historically certain that Jesus died on the cross. And so here's a book that comes along 650 years later that tries to tell what happened to Jesus when we have eyewitness testimony from the people who were there that tell us really what happened to Jesus. So I'm not going to trust the Quran on that point. And that doesn't mean everything the Quran says is false. Most world religions have some truth. It just means where it differs from the Bible, it can't be true. Now, with regard to Buddhism, Buddhism is basically atheistic. Some forms may be pantheistic. But if theism is true, in other words, if God exists, then any non-theism can't be true on the issue of the nature of God. Because Buddhism doesn't admit there's a God when it seems quite clear there is a God. So now, again, Buddhists may teach some things that are true, but when it comes to the existence and nature of God, they appear to have it wrong.
Yeah, there's just fundamental difference if they apply the law of non-contradiction logic. Buddhism and Hinduism and many other religions are making contradictory truth claims about the nature of reality. And as Frank pointed out, if a theistic worldview can be established, if there is a singular creator God who created all things out of nothing, then that would automatically, by logic, then exclude any other non-theism. So if you establish one, then you can certainly take away the others.
Have you ever heard of people say, oh, look, all religions teach basically the same thing. They all ought to teach that you love one another. That's basically it, right? Well, if you think about that for more than 15 seconds, you realize that's not even true. First of all, not all world religions do teach you to love one another. I mean, certainly some radical forms of Islam don't. Certainly Satanism doesn't. Right? But let's say for the sake of argument that's true, that religions basically have a common moral code, which is true. They do agree on that. But you know what they disagree on? They disagree on the nature of God, the nature of man, sin, salvation, heaven, hell, and creation. Outside of that, they're exactly the same. Yeah. They disagree on all the essentials, and they agree on the more superficial things. You'd expect religions to have the same basic moral code. Why? Because everybody knows the moral code because it's written on their hearts. So you would expect them to express that moral code in their religious writings. That's because God has given the moral code to everyone. But they come to different conclusions on the existence of God and the nature of God and sin, salvation, heaven, hell, and creation.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next question is, how can you assume that something that is timeless and immaterial and spaceless for that matter, how can you just assume that when there's no other example of it in the world, and isn't it just used as a kind of a wild card to tell about the concept?
There are examples of it in the world right now. We're using it right now. We're using the laws of logic to communicate. They're not in space, they're not in time, they're not made of material. We all know them, and we're using them right now to understand one another. And I think that actually is grounded in the nature of God, these laws of logic. But everyone in here believes in spaceless, timeless, immaterial things. The laws of logic, the laws of mathematics, love. Where are you going to find love? In all the wrong places. No, love is not made of molecules. There's a lot of things that aren't made of molecules you believe in. Justice. Do you believe in justice? It's not made of molecules. It's spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Moral values are all spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. That's why they're grounded in the nature of God. They don't change. He's the unchangeable grounding for all that.
Great. Do you have anything to say then? Okay. I got another question here. Is why does natural disasters happen where people get killed and a lot of people who is also not Christians and then will go to hell? Why does this happen? Why does God allow this? And so on, yeah.
The other day.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously the world is broken. We all realize that. And the natural disasters can all be traced back initially to sin. We live in a broken world. And so we're no longer in a paradise. Things are going to go wrong. Now, a natural disaster comes along and kills a whole bunch of people, and you just said, well, maybe if God had kept them alive longer, they would have become Christians. Of course, God knows who's going to believe and who isn't. So if they would have become Christians, maybe he would have averted it. He would have averted it because he wants people to be saved more than we do. So natural disasters occur because this is a fallen world, but good can come from evil and does come from evil. God brings good from evil all the time. In fact, I had a situation in Michigan State once where I was given the presentation, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, which takes like an hour and 45 minutes to do. And I can usually tell if there's an atheist in the crowd who's not with me at all, because he sits there like this the whole time. He didn't even laugh at a funny Homer Simpson clip I had. He just sat there like this. And I went, uh-oh. It's going to be trouble when questions start. And so, as soon as I said, okay, any questions? He went, Achtung! No, he didn't say that. I said, yes, sir. He said, if there is a good God, why is there all this evil in the world? I said, sir, that's an excellent question. Maybe because if he stopped all the evil in the world, he might start with you and me, because we do evil every day, don't we? You see, we only think about God stopping other people. You see that guy over there? Stop him. He's doing all the evil, when we do evil every day. If God stopped all the evil in the world, he'd have to start with free will, and he might start with me, or he might start with him. And he said, well, I gave some examples of how good can come from evil. You know how you go through suffering, that you can get closer to God and that you can get better character and you can persevere and you can learn that things aren't all about you. You know how C.S. Lewis said sometimes you only look up when you're on your back. I mean, imagine if you got everything you wanted every time. Every time you asked for something, you got it. What would you become in this fallen nature we have right now? I know I would become even more of a moral monster than I already am. It would become all about me all the time, just basic narcissism. It would be all about me, me, me. In fact, what do we call kids who get everything they want? Spoiled. What's spoiled about them? Their character's spoiled. You can't give a kid everything he or she wants. You'll ruin them. We need a certain amount of obstacles and evil in the world to keep us honest and to prevent us from becoming all about me. So anyway, he said, I can't see how God can bring good from evil. And I was about to say something else, but there was a guy sitting 10 feet from him. Oh, actually, before I got to set this up, he said, why do babies die? And I gave a couple of reasons why that possibly could happen, and God can still bring good from evil from it. And he still wasn't satisfied. And so a guy sitting 10 feet from him raised his hand, and I went, yes, sir, go ahead. And he said, my mom, or no, he didn't put it that way. He said, I know of a woman who was raped, and the rape nearly destroyed her. He said, but she decided not to punish the baby for the sins of the father. And she gave birth to a baby boy, and his voice started to crack. And then he said, this baby boy grew up to be a pastor who has led many people to Christ. And then he was crying by that point. And then he said, and that baby boy turned out to be me. And he looked over at the atheist and he said, my mom brought good from evil. If she can, so can God. I just said that. Okay, that's it. I'm not saying another word.
And the pinnacle of that example that Frank gave is, of course, the cross. Mm-hmm. Which, when you look at it, the cross, how could they have crucified the most perfect, sinless human being that ever lived? But as Joseph said to his brothers in the Old Testament, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So God can even turn something that is bad, natural disasters, and turn it into good. So as Frank said, though, the natural disasters is because of the free will of humans in the beginning.
Great, thanks, guys. There is actually a lot of questions on some of the same subjects, and it's about that it seems like there is kind of a difference between the God in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Actually the question is actually on Christian ethics again, which is what about genocide? What about the Canaanites? What about all the crazy rules there is in Leviticus, for example, or in the Old Testament? What do we do about that when our non-Christian friends bring it up? Do you have an answer for that?
You say we're out of time. How about those Rander football team?
Yeah,
how about them? How are they doing? They're doing pretty well, or what?
No, very good.
Can you give me slide 257? Slide 257, Pather. Stand by for vectors, Victor. Dun, 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 dun.
Can you say pen in German again?
There it is. The killing of the Canaanites. By the way, this is in your app, okay? So you don't have to memorize any of this. My first question to people who bring this up, particularly if they're an atheist, is if there is no God, why is any Old Testament atrocity wrong? In other words, the atheists are blaming God for being evil. They're saying God is evil for, say, killing the Canaanites. Well, wait a minute. If you're an atheist, where are you getting this evil from? Because if you're an atheist, there's no good, which means there can be no evil. But it's a fair question if the atheist is saying, okay, let's say for the sake of argument, God does exist. It's a problem inside of your worldview, the Christian worldview. Okay, fair question then. Why would God do such a thing, right? Next question. Is God arbitrary, or does he give reasons for judging people in the Old Testament? Does he give reasons, or does he just wake up, metaphorically, wake up one day and say, look, the Canaanites, I want them all dead? Is that what happens? What happens, really? What does the text say about the Canaanites? For 400 years, their iniquity, their sin went on, and they got to the point where they were actually sacrificing their children to the molten hot god Molech. Here's a picture of Molech. You can see the baby on the arms of this metal idol. What the Canaanites would do is they would take their little babies and put them on this idol on fire and sacrifice the child to this metal idol. And the musicians around this particular idol would pound their drums louder when the baby was put on so the parents wouldn't hear the screams of their children. Meanwhile, they were involved in bestiality. They were involved in adultery. They were involved in homosexuality. They were involved in every sexual sin you could imagine. Now, might God have had a reason to stop that? Particularly the child sacrifice part? You know, every time I go to a college campus, some atheist will say, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? Well, here is an example where God does, and the atheists are complaining about it. You notice that? God steps in to stop it. Why complain that God doesn't stop evil, but then complain when he does? They say, well, it's too harsh. He killed the kids. Okay, let's take a look at that. Is God committing murder by ending lives on earth? Let me ask the question this way. If God exists and he takes his hand away from you and you die, has he murdered you? Can God murder anyone? What is murder? Murder is the unjustified taking of an innocent human life. Can God do that? No, God can't murder anyone. Why? Because he is the giver of life. He is the taker of life. He can take us out at any point. In fact, God has the right to usher people into the next life, whether they are 2 years old or 82 years old. People never die. They just change location. I mean, if there is an afterlife, God can take you into the afterlife whenever he wants. And the reason he took out an entire culture is he explains why. Because they were so evil and they wouldn't get out of the land, so I could get the promised people in the promised land so the promised Messiah could come and save the entire world. He moved them out. Now, there's a book written on this, and one last thing. This is an Old Testament theocracy, which kind of answers the second part of this question. It was unique and temporary. It was not the ideal for all time, but the means to a promised new covenant. So the Old Testament laws are not ideal for us today. They were just for ancient Israel. And there's a book written on this called Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. I highly recommend you get. In fact, Copan mentions that contrary to the common neo-atheist caricatures, the Old Testament laws weren't the permanent divine ideal for all persons everywhere. God informed his people that a new enduring covenant would be necessary. By the Old Testament's own admission, the Mosaic law was inferior and future-looking. And in fact, he goes on to point out, well, that's just talking about how the fact that even Jesus said that Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard, but it was not this way from the beginning. He accommodated to the culture at the time. Now, was it genocide? No. As Copan points out, he says God was concerned with sin, not ethnicity. In fact, as we read the Old Testament prophets, they, with God, were angered about Israel's disobedience, and they threatened divine judgment on Israel or Judah more often than they did on the pagan nations. In fact, God wipes out Israelites on several occasions. Take a look at Exodus 32 and Numbers 25. In the theocratic rule, there was capital crimes. And God even took out Israelites by the thousands because of what they did. One last thing on this, and then Ted can add anything, and that is, why does it seem the Old Testament God is different than the New Testament God? There's a lot of reasons, but let me just give you the one main reason I think is most prevalent here, or most instructive here, and that is, how much time does the Old Testament cover? Let's just say from Abraham to Jesus. It covers, well, let's just go to Abraham to Malachi, because that's when the last Old Testament book was written. That's about 1,500 or so years, right? 1,500 years. How much time does the New Testament cover with regard to history? 70, maybe. Maybe 60. Maybe from Jesus to about 62 AD. Maybe slightly after that. Maybe 70. If you've got a document that's covering 100 or 1,500 years, which is about 20 times as long as the New Testament, there's going to be a lot more time for judgment to occur. In fact, you know where the judgment came down in the New Testament? Right after it was written, 70 AD. Jesus predicted it. And who came into Jerusalem and wiped out the Jews? The Romans. So the same kind of judgment that happened in the Old Testament happened in the New Testament, but it happened just a few years after the New Testament was finally finished. By the way, love is mentioned more in the Old Testament than the New. It's a bigger document. But God is more seen as gracious and loving in the New than even in the Old than in the New. It's just covering a longer period of time, so there's going to be more opportunity for judgment.
Yep. Just to add, not much to add, but in the Old Testament, I teach Old Testament at seminary, and I've been teaching it for about 11 years. And the more I teach it, the more this point is reinforced. And I would challenge anybody who would think that the God of the Old Testament is more wrathful than the God of the New Testament, because obviously the Scripture says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is holy, God is righteous. But yet God is also loving. In fact, Moses, throughout the Exodus and throughout the Psalms, he is described as gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. In fact, at the very, very beginning of time, when Adam and Eve sinned, God told Adam that the day you eat the fruit of the garden, the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. So Adam and Eve ate the fruit. Did they die immediately? No. God had mercy upon them. He had grace. In fact, he made them animal coverings. He atoned for their sin. So even though God is a God of holiness and a God of justice, he's also a God of love and a God of grace. And you see this grace all throughout the Old Testament. In fact, King David, of course, there was a time in his life that he thought that what God wanted was the blood of bulls and goats. All those things of the blood of bulls and goats and the sacrifices all pointed ultimately to Christ. They were teaching Israel about what it means to have a relationship with God. But it wasn't the blood of the bulls and goats that saved a person. It was believing what God had said. It was trusting in the Lord. In fact, what God wants, and what he's always wanted from the Old Testament to the New Testament, is he wants people who will believe his word, who will trust in his name. Because when David finally captured the Ark of the Covenant back from the Philistines, he was carrying the Ark back to Jerusalem. And of course, you remember the story, they were carrying on an ox cart, and the ox cart stumbled. And of course, the Ark of the Covenant began to slide off. You guys remember that story? And then the guy reached up to keep the ark from falling off. And Uzzah. God struck him dead. And David was like, how in the world how can a man walk with God if God is like this? And so on the way back to Jerusalem, David sacrificed a bull every 6 steps going up to the temple in Jerusalem, or the tabernacle. And then finally, it dawned on David what God wanted. In Psalm 51, it records what God wants. David said this. This is after David was confronted with his sin with Bathsheba. Remember, he committed adultery with Bathsheba, and so Nathan the prophet confronted David with his sin, and David in Psalm 51 asked God to forgive him, and he says, "God, you do not want the blood of bulls and goats, but a broken and contrite heart. These, O Lord, you will not despise." It's not the blood of bulls and goats you want. You want me to trust in you. So that's what God has always wanted. And so, and also one other point on this about the point in the book, Copan book, and that is the failure to distinguish between the prescriptive parts of the Bible and the descriptive parts. The most important rule in interpreting the Bible is actually 3 words in English. Well, I don't know the Danish words, but it's context, context, context. What is the context of the text? You never read one verse. You always look at the verses before it and the verses after it, and you look, especially the Levitical laws were meant for Israel, not for the church. Mm-hmm. So
great answer. Do you want to know what the translation is?
Yes.
Context, context, context.
Okay. Very good.
So yeah, that's how.
That's 3 Danish words.
Yeah. So now you know 3 Danish words and one very hard German.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Okay.
Kugelschreiber.
No,
that's
German. That's German. Yeah. We'll do that tomorrow. In the morning, there will be a German...
A Kugelschreiber?
Yeah, a Kugelschreiber from Frank Turek and Ted Wright. All right.
Yeah.
What would you say to a person who actually believe God exists, but do not want to be, bound by the faith, or do not want to live the Christian faith out? who don't actually want to trust in Jesus because they're scared that they're going to follow a lot of rules or be in a certain way. Yeah.
That's their choice. I mean, I mentioned this earlier today, so forgive those who were there earlier today, but there's a difference between belief that and belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is true. That's just the head. That's the mind. That's why we do apologetics, giving answers and evidence. But belief in goes beyond just intellectually knowing about it. It's trusting in Christ once you know that he is the Savior. And that is a matter of the heart, not just the head. And the Bible even says that the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. You see, they know intellectually that God exists better than we do. This is James 2:19, by the way. But they don't trust in him. They don't want him. And so to go from belief that to belief in is a step of the will. I've had many people say, I know it's true, but I don't want to do it. In fact, Ed was telling us about people he knows just yesterday at dinner. Yeah. They know it's true, but they just don't want it right now. And you see, God is not interested in just intellectual assent any more than a young girl is interested, or a woman is interested in a man saying, gee, you'd make a great wife, but then he never asks her to marry him. Right? In fact, when I first met my wife about 28 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. See? That's the difference between belief that and belief in. So if they don't want it, God is not going to force them into heaven against their will. And by the way, it's not about following rules. It's about trusting in Christ. He'll change you. And, of course, people are still going to sin, but it's not based on what you have to do. It's based upon what he has already done. That's right.
Romans talk also about that we suppress the truth, or people suppress the truth. Can you try to elaborate on that, maybe, Ted?
Yeah, Romans chapter 1, Paul makes this point, and he says...
Ted, because you're good at that.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate that on Ted?
Can you elaborate on
suppressing sin, Ted? Can you tell us about that?
All the time. See how they treat me up here? The Apostle Paul said in Romans chapter 1, of course, he said that in 1:18 and 19, he says that men suppress the truth in unrighteousness. It's not about that they don't know. It's just that they don't want it. They get it. They understand it. They just don't want it. So if Paul's right, then that means that everyone can know that there is a God. That there is a God. But of course, they're not going to actually, in order to believe in him, then takes an act of faith. But everyone can know that there's a God, but they suppress that truth in unrighteousness. And he tells us how they know that. There's actually two ways that people can know there's a God. Apart from the Bible, apart from even God's word, everybody can know there's a creator from creation and conscience. He says that since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen from the things that have been made, so that men are without excuse. So basically what that's saying is that no one can say that when they get to heaven, or when they stand before God in the judgment, they say, well, God, I didn't know you existed. Nope, wait, hang on. Witness number one, come in here. And witness number one is creation. Creation says, I've been telling you since the beginning of time that there's a God. There's a God. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no place on earth where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes to the end of the world. So whether you're in the deserts of Arabia, whether you're in Morocco, whether you're in South America, Canada, Denmark, Sweden, that's his favorite place, by the way. No, just kidding. You can know that there's a God. And then the second witness is conscience. Now, I don't know what is the Danish word for conscience?
Samvittighed.
Okay, take it. That's the word. But the English word conscience is actually a compound word. Con with science, with knowledge. Conscience with knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of right and wrong. Where did that knowledge come from? It can only come from a moral lawgiver. So where did that knowledge come? Paul actually talks about this again in Romans chapter 2, where he says that the Romans who don't have the law, they don't have the Bible, the Romans and the Gentiles, but Paul says that they have the law written where? On their hearts. They have it written in their heart because God has planted eternity in the hearts of men so that they can know that there's a creator from creation and conscience. So, but that is not going to get them saved. That's just going to make them qualified to be a demon. And that's it.
Thanks, Ed.
So,
Okay, let's go to evolution just for a bit. Did God create the earth in 7 days or through evolution? Or did he do both, or what did he do?
do you have a slide for that,
Are
Frank?
you telling me I look like a monkey?
A bit?
Slide 112, please.
We have an ad for that and a slide for that.
112. 112. There you go. Does science show that the universe is old? Because a lot of times we think that science shows the universe is old. Well, the light from the stars seems to show that the universe is old, but you have to assume the speed of light hasn't changed. In other words, you're making an assumption when you're dating the universe by the light from the stars. You're also making an assumption. Some people who try and say the earth is young try and use salt in the ocean as an indication that the earth is young because there'd be a lot more salt in it apparently if it was older. But you're still making assumptions you can't prove. Even in your radioactive dating, you're making assumptions you can't prove. So you're always making assumptions because nobody was there when the universe was created. You're making an assumptions to try and figure out how old the universe is. Now, here's the deal. If the only way the universe is not 13.7 or 8 billion years old is if the laws of physics were different in the past than they are today. If the laws of physics were different in the past, then who knows how old the universe is. If the laws of physics have been consistent, the universe looks like it's about 13.8 billion years old. Now, it's making an assumption either way. It's probably a good assumption to say that the laws of physics haven't changed, but nobody knows for sure. Does the Bible teach a young universe? What is the first verse in the Bible in English? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, when did God create the heavens and the earth? In the beginning. When was the beginning? It doesn't say, does it? It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You say, what about the days? The first day doesn't begin till verse 3. In fact, all the days begin with the phrase, and God said. In fact, if you look at this account, it is an historical account put in a poetic form. Because the first 3 days are God creating, the second 3 days are God filling. The last day, God rests. So, I'm here to say that since the initial creation happened before day one, the Bible doesn't say how old the universe is. But suppose you say the days do have something to do with the age of the universe, because you could certainly make that case. Well, even if the days are pertinent to the age question, the word for day in Genesis 1 could mean longer periods of time. For example, actually, words don't have meanings, they have usage. It depends on how the word is used, what it means. It could mean 24 hours. It could also mean 12 hours. Why? Because in verse 5 it says he called the light day and the darkness night. Well, that's 12 hours. It could mean an era. Like if I were to say Roger Federer was a great tennis player in his day, you wouldn't say, well, gee, Roger Federer could hit the ball for 24 hours and then he just totally fell apart. Right? You would know what I meant. It would mean an era. The Bible could be using it in that sense. And there's a fourth sense in which it could be used I'll get to in a minute. The third day seems to require longer than 24 hours because you have the growth of vegetation, including fruit-bearing plants. I don't know about you, but even if you put Miracle-Gro on plants, they don't grow that fast. You say, well, maybe God sped it up a little bit. Well, now you're making an assumption you can't prove. And then the sixth day seems to require longer because it's the naming of the animals. Do you know how many animals are out there? How many animals are just down here at the rainforest? You guys been down to the rainforest here in Randers? Man, that is cool and hot.
I know, sorry.
We said, hey, you guys want to go to the rainforest? We've got an hour to kill. Yeah, sure. You know, we're dressed up real nice. Is it hot in there? Oh, no. We're there with our leather jackets and our backpacks and our dress shirts. We were done. We had to wring ourselves out. Anyway, you know how many animals are just in there? You know how long it would take to name all the animals? In fact, Brad Stein, a Christian comedian, has kind of a comedy bit on this. He goes, In the beginning of the day, when Adam would see the animals come by, he was really creative. He'd see an animal come by and he'd go, hippopotamus. He'd see another come by, rhinoceros, toward the end of the day. Oh, man. Cow. Ox. You know, he's just run out of gas. Finally, here's the fourth usage of the word day. The seventh day seems to require longer because it hasn't ended yet. In fact, it is longer. We're still in the seventh day right now. According to Hebrews 4, God is still at rest and we're still in the seventh day. So if the 7 days are longer, or if the seventh day is longer, then maybe the other days are longer. The bottom line is this. There is no conflict between science and the Bible. There's only conflict between some interpretations of the scientific and biblical data. The universe may be old or it may be young. Science and the Bible are not definitive. That God created is more certain than when. Now, if you find this an important topic for you, that's fine. But I urge you, do not make this what we call a test for orthodoxy. Don't tell somebody that they have to be, say, a young earth creationist in order to be a Christian. Because I guarantee you this. When you die, God isn't going to say, now, did you think it was old or young? He's going to say, what did you do with Jesus? He's not going to say, you thought it was old? You're out of here. No. By the way, this has never been an issue in the church until this past century. And there was a much bigger supposed conflict between science and the Bible 400 years ago. What was it? Anyone? What is it?
If it was flat or round.
I'm sorry? Flat or round? No, not quite, but close. Where's Jesus when you need him? He's over there? Did the earth go around the sun or did the sun go around the earth? Galileo, you remember heliocentrism and geocentrism? Well, I submit to you, you can make a better case from the Bible that the earth does not move than you can make that the earth is only thousands of years old. Why? Because it says the earth is set on its foundations. It doesn't move. The sun rises and the sun sets. In fact, that's what some of the people said to Galileo. The Bible says the earth doesn't move. And you're saying it does. You're wrong. Now today, do you know anybody who thinks the earth doesn't move? Are there people out there who are moving earthers and stationary earthers? And do the stationary earthers say to the moving earthers, you're giving up the Bible, man? No, they don't say that. Why? Because we know the Bible uses observational language. It does look like the earth is stationary. It's talking about the stability of the earth, that God has provided a great stable place to live. And we do this today, even though we know the earth's moving and the sun isn't. When you go home and watch the news tonight, the weatherman's going to say sunrise tomorrow at 6:58. He's not going to say earth rotation will become apparent at 6:58. You get the idea.
Great. Okay, there's apparently some agnostics in here, and somebody wants to know, what do you want to say, or what could you say to a person who is agnostic?
I would ask the follow-up question to the agnostic, whether they are open to the evidence or closed to the evidence. Are they a hard agnostic or a soft agnostic? That's how we kind of sort of describe it. So that's what I would ask. If they're a hard agnostic, like skepticism about anything, then I would ask them, why aren't they skeptical about their agnosticism? Why, they're sure about that they can't know. Why are they sure about that? But if they're open to the evidence, then of course, then I would begin to show some evidence that there's a God, there's a creator, and by the book. Yes. Frank, you have anything to add?
No, that's right. I mean, if they're open, great. I mean, I was agnostic at one point. In fact, I came from such a tough neighborhood in New Jersey that when my friends found out I was an agnostic, they burned a question mark on my front lawn. Oh, some of you.
Well, the word just literally means agnosis, no knowledge. Mm-hmm. So it's the Latin term is ignoramus, actually. It is.
But that's not what an agnostic is.
No.
Yeah.
But it just literally means I don't know. Yeah, no knowledge. I have no knowledge, and I can't know.
By the way, the the alternative to there's no evidence for God, as some atheists say, is not atheism. Because the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. The alternative to I have no evidence for God is I'm agnostic. Maybe evidence will arise about God. So atheism is saying I know there's no God. Agnosticism says I don't know, and of course Christianity says, well, we do know. No, not beyond all doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay, can you explain, actually, a lot of the young people want to know why you say, I do not have enough faith to be an atheist. What do you mean by it?
Well, I'm using the word faith in the way it's used in everyday language today. This isn't the Bible definition of faith, because the Bible definition of faith, most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about belief in. But like an atheist like Richard Dawkins will say, faith is believing in something when you have no evidence for it, or believing in something even against the evidence. And so what I'm saying is there's such good evidence that Christianity is true that you just need a little bit of faith to believe in it. But for atheism, the opposite is true. You might be able to find a couple things you go, well, maybe this is consistent with atheism, but you need a lot of faith to be an atheist. That's all.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? For example, what arguments are there for atheism?
Okay. Yeah. Give me 228, please. 228.
Is God good?
He is.
Thank you.
It's right after this. Stand by.
If he is.
229, sorry. Stand by. There you go. Here is just, I don't have time to explain all this evidence, but here's all the evidence, I think, or some of the evidence that points to God, okay? Here's evidence that's supposed to not point to God. But there's a problem with the evidence on the right. Evil is actually an argument for God, because we said before, objective evil presupposes objective good, and objective good requires God. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you have to have sunshine. So in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have good without evil. You can have sunshine without shadows, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. So in reality, that's not the right slide, forget it. In reality, evil actually winds up on the yes side of the column. So I think there's very good evidence that God exists. And you have to have a lot of faith to believe that everything on the yes side of the column can be explained by molecules, because that's basically what atheists say. And some of these things quite obviously aren't made of molecules, like the laws of logic, objective morality, the laws of mathematics. There you go.
Do you have anything to add, or?
Well, yeah, just a further clarification on the design of the universe. I was talking with, I think, Patrick or one of you guys earlier today. We were talking about intelligent design, and I don't know here in Europe or in Denmark or in the Nordic countries if you guys know about this science. It's a new science. It's being developed in California. It's been around for about 10 or 15 years now. It's called biomimicry. You guys ever heard of biomimicry? Who's heard of biomimicry? Biomimicry, besides, okay, bio means life, mimicry means imitation, so imitating life. So scientists today are actually looking to nature to solve engineering and design problems. So on one hand, people are saying that nature or creation is not designed, it's a product of natural random mutation and evolution, but yet on the other hand, they're looking to nature to solve engineering problems that they can't even figure out themselves. So I'm like, isn't that hypocritical to say it's not designed, but yet, well, there's some good designs over here. Let's use these to make our designs better. And one of the first examples of biomimicry was actually solved in the 1950s. I don't know if you guys know, does anybody know what the first aircraft to break the sound barrier, what was it in aviation history? It was actually a rocket. It was called the Bell X-1 by Chuck Yeager at Edwards Air Force Base in the 1950s. He broke the sound barrier, went Mach 1, faster than the speed of sound. So after that happened, engineers were trying to build a jet engine to break the sound barrier. And they could never do it because of the physical forces. The air going inside of the jet engine was making the jet engine flame out. So an engineer went home and was watching a nature documentary show on birds. And he watched a documentary on falcons, peregrine falcons are birds that dive really fast. And very interesting thing about the falcon, biologists were trying to figure out how the falcon was able to breathe in these really high-speed dives. And when they began to study the nose and the beak of the peregrine falcon, they found that there's a little cone in the nose of the falcon, and it sticks out and basically reduces the air pressure coming into the beak of the bird so he can breathe. So this engineer got to thinking, So it went back to the laboratory, and they put a cone inside of the jet engine, and guess what? Broke the sound barrier. In fact, one of the engines they developed from that was the engine that went on the SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest aircraft in the world. Still today, no aircraft has ever beat the speed record of the SR-71 Blackbird. In fact, it's top secret. Some known things that it's done is...
Don't tell them anymore.
Oh, okay, I know.
You'll have to kill everybody in the room.
It was flying over Russia at one point when America and Russia were kind of in, they sent us SR-71 and the Russians fired a missile to hit it, and it just outran the missile. And the missile ran out of fuel. So anyway, and that's just an example of how can you explain that design from just random mutation? Does it make sense?
It's great. I think Jesus started talking over there now. Yeah.
Jesus, quiet down over there.
Okay, great. Okay, there was a question also. We have a lot of problems in both in Denmark, Europe, but also in the States with homosexuality, with abortion, and all these kind of moral problems. How do we as Christians kind of debate this? How do we go into it, and how do we relate to it? Also because here in Denmark we have a state church where a lot of the pastors, a lot of the churches actually is for example, homosexual marriage. What do we do as Christians to relate to this and to prevent it, and how do we do? What do we do?
Can you give me 336?
Yes, slide for anything. Also for love.
Does anybody know what this is? That's South Korea. Well, that's the whole Korean peninsula, right? South Korea is filled with light. It's filled with productivity. It's one of the most Christianized countries in the world. It has religious freedom. North Korea, on the other hand, as you can see, is basically a concentration camp. It's dark. It's even dark to the gospel. There's one primary reason for the difference between South and North Korea. Don't say electricity. What's the primary reason for the difference, do you think? What? Freedom, yes, which is related to a bigger word known as politics. The South has political and religious freedom. The North does not. That is the fundamental difference between the two countries and the two outcomes of the two countries. And I know some Christians, particularly in our country, who say, oh, we ought not get involved in politics at all. We just have to preach the gospel. When people say that to me, I show them this slide. And I say, if you think preaching the gospel is important, you better think politics are important. Why? Because politics affects our ability to preach the gospel. If you don't think so, go to North Korea and try and do what we're doing in this room right now. You can go to some of the countries I've been to. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I've been to China. I've been to Iran. We can't do what we're doing in this room right now legally in those countries. Why not? Politics. Politically, they've ruled it out. I wrote an entire book on this issue of same-sex marriage. It's big in our country, too. It's called Correct, Not Politically Correct, How Same-Sex Marriage Hurts Everyone. I don't get into talking about the Bible in there. I just talk about the reasons why marriage between a man and a woman should be the only type of relationship promoted by the government. And there's a number of reasons for this, but it all boils down to one issue, and that's children. Because if you equate same-sex relationships to opposite-sex relationships and call them both marriage, what you're doing is you're saying that marriage has nothing to do with children. Well, if marriage has nothing to do with children, if it's gender neutral, then what institution is in society is devoted to children? There isn't one. And you know, there are people in our country always talking about, well, I'm a fiscal conservative but a social liberal. And I say to them, you can't consistently be both. Why? Because the reason our country is having fiscal problems is because we have moral problems. Because in our country, what has happened is really same-sex marriage is a symptom of no-fault divorce. We got into no-fault divorce in the 1970s, where you could just divorce somebody if you just didn't like the way they looked one day. A year later, you were divorced. And now about half of marriages end in divorce. What does that do to the children? The children are in broken homes. Children from broken homes, particularly fatherless homes, commit about 80% of the crimes. Which means welfare goes up, crime fighting has to go up, which means productivity goes down, which means taxes have to go up to pay for the government that swells to try and take care of all the problems, which means the economy goes down. So our economic and moral problems are related, but nobody wants to talk about that because they don't want to seem like they're moralists. And when it comes to religious freedom in our country, what's happening in our country right now, I don't know if it's true here in Denmark, Christians are being fined because they're trying to live out their Christian faith, and homosexuals are suing them because they won't celebrate their homosexual weddings. There's bakers that have been sued, photographers, caterers. They're being sued because they say, look, in my good conscience, I just can't do your same-sex wedding. I'll be happy to bake you a cake for another reason, but I can't do it for a same-sex wedding. There is going to come a time, unless the church stands up and says, for the sake of children and for the sake of religious freedom, we can't equate these two types of relationships. If the church doesn't stand up one day in our country, and maybe here in Denmark, I don't know your politics here, one day you will not be able to preach the gospel.
What are you going to do? You're just going to prohibit homosexuality?
No, I'm not saying you need to prohibit it. In fact, that's an excellent question. Give me another slide here. Stand by. I'm not talking about prohibiting homosexuality. I'm talking about not promoting it. 342, if you would. 342. First of all, laws address behaviors, not persons. Nobody is being discriminated against when it comes to this issue of homosexuality. Marriage is the foundation of civilization. It creates children, it raises children by a mom and a dad, it civilizes men, it protects women, it stabilizes and perpetuates society. In fact, the reason the state is involved in marriage at all is not to recognize love between two people. It's because when a man and a woman come together, they can perpetuate and stabilize society like no other relationship can. Now, the government has three options with any behavior. The government can prohibit a behavior, it can permit a behavior, or promote a behavior. Right now, in most states in our nation anyway, the government promotes marriage between a man and a woman because it uniquely perpetuates and stabilizes society. It permits, or I should say it prohibits, other relationships like polygamy, incest, and pedophilia because they are harmful. And for many years in our country anyway, homosexual relationships were prohibited because medically they are dangerous. However, in our country now, we permit homosexual relationships and heterosexual relationships that are not married relationships. So this has nothing to do with tolerance. Homosexual and heterosexual relationships are already tolerated. Right now, we are promoting one type of relationship because it uniquely brings benefits. Nobody is being discriminated against. Everybody has the same right to engage in a heterosexual marriage if they choose to. The law applies equally to everyone. Everyone already has equal rights. What some people want is the right to marry somebody of the same sex. Well, that's a new right. And logically, where does that end? If gender is not a requirement for marriage, then why is Why two? In fact, in our country, it's already happening. We've had attorneys bring to the courts now polygamy, because they said that the same logic being used for same-sex marriage can be used for polygamy. And there's actually people in a group in our country called NAMBLA. I don't know if you've heard of NAMBLA. It's the North American Man-Boy Love Association, pedophiles. And they are using the same logic to say, look, I was born this way, so now you're going to need to accept it. There's no end to this logically. So, by the way, we do this same thing when it comes to vocations. We promote certain vocations like police work because everybody benefits from police work. We permit just about every other vocation, and we prohibit some harmful ones like being a hitman or a drug dealer or something, right? Well, because we promote certain particular vocations like police work, does that mean you're being discriminated against if you choose not to become a police officer? No. In fact, you're getting the benefits of being a police officer even if you're not one. In fact, the same is true when it comes to same-sex marriage. That even if you don't get involved in heterosexual marriage, what I call natural marriage, you still get the benefits from it. Why? Because when people get married, the entire society benefits for those reasons I mentioned earlier. So you don't even need to be talking about the Bible here. You just need to be talking about good reason.
Okay, thanks. We can 2 questions more and then we need to end. But one question is that can you explain the argument of the resurrection?
Well, he just did earlier with the 4 questions. Does truth exist? Does God exist? Are miracles possible? And is the New Testament true? So the argument basically goes like this. Truth is that which corresponds to the real, that which corresponds to reality. And it's based on a logical principle called the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction helps us to discover what's true. And it protects us from nonsense statements like seeing 2 opposite things, like this table exists right now and doesn't exist right now. Well, those 2 statements contradict, so that's the law of non-contradiction helps us discover that. And again, Frank was talking about this earlier about if someone says, no one has the truth. Well, of course, what do you ask them? Is that true? So truth exists. The next question is, does God exist? And again, the 3 arguments were the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and the moral argument. Don't want to go through all those again, but you can see this from the beginning of the universe, the design of life, and the existence of the moral law. And then the second thing, or the third question is, do miracles occur? Can miracles happen? And once again, this is in the book. It's also in our app as well. And if there is a theistic God who created the space-time universe, if a spaceless, timeless, immaterial being created the universe, then that opens up the possibility of miracles. That's what C.S. Lewis said. He said, if you admit that there's a God, if you open the door of the universe, that there is a spaceless, timeless, then he can actually interact with the world. So if that happens, and again, to reemphasize a point Frank was making earlier, that the greatest miracle, of course, is creation out of nothing. Let me give you one one further confirmation of that, and it's something called the cosmological constants. There was a German scientist back lived many years ago. His name is Max Planck. Planck, sometimes we call him, but he came up with these constants, and he came up with the Planck units. But basically, these are numbers that describe what we can know scientifically. And one of the units was called Planck time, and basically, I think it's like 10 to the negative 47 seconds after the Big Bang or big explosion, or whatever you want to call it. And basically, what Planck said is that when you get to that time, you're at a dead end as to what science can tell you. If you start to think about what may have caused that expansion or explosion or whatever, you're now doing philosophy. You have left science and now you are into philosophy. So I think it's most reasonable to assume that a spaceless, timeless, immaterial being brought the universe into existence out of nothing. And that certainly seems to point to a supernatural, powerful creator. So if truth exists and there is a creator and miracles are possible, the fourth thing we need to look at is the only place that we learn about, now there are other places that write about it, but the primary place that we learn about the resurrection is the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then, of course, Paul's writings. They record in their documents, they claim to be eyewitnesses. Frank went over some of the evidences there. Did you talk about the 6 C's?
Briefly, yeah.
Briefly, the embarrassing
in fact,
testimony.
We'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow night, and it's really unpacked at length in the book.
Yeah. So check that out. But in essence, basically, when you get to the New Testament documents, you can look at the historical details of this, and this is a very historically trustworthy document. So the reasoning is that if the New Testament is true and historically reliable, then it can give us historically reliable information about the event of the resurrection. And when you look at the internal evidence itself of the writers, why would they make this up? I mean, what benefit did they get out of making this up? They all died for their faith. They all died believing that they saw Jesus rise from the dead. So that's sort of the argument as we present it in the book. And actually in the book, we go through 12 points. The 4 questions, does truth exist, does God exist, are miracles possible, and is the New Testament reliable, are actually elaborated in 12 other points, or actually 12 full points, and it goes into much more detail, but that's the basic argument.
In fact, let me just read some short little thing here called The One Solitary Life. And here's what happened. I was at the University of Maryland a couple years ago, and I was talking to some atheists after the presentation, and this one atheist was really negative on the New Testament, but I could tell he didn't really know a lot about it. So I asked him, I said, have you ever read the New Testament? And you'd have thought I asked him if he had just stopped beating his wife or something. He was flummoxed. He had never read it. Never even read it. I said, let me mention something to you. That the person, the human being known as Jesus Christ, is undeniably, unarguably the most influential human being that has ever lived. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what religious upbringing you've had. If you consider yourself somebody who's seeking the truth, you have to at least read what he allegedly said. Don't tell me you're looking for truth when you haven't even read it. And so I said, I want you to listen to one little thing here. And this is from our book. It's in our book. It's called One Solitary Life. Forget all the evidence for a second. Just consider what has happened over the past 2,000 years. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant. He grew up in another village where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. Then for 3 years, he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never had a family or owned a home. He didn't go to college. He never lived in a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place where he was born. He did nothing of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33 when the tide of public opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between 2 thieves. He was dying. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for his garments, the only property he had on earth. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 20 centuries have come and gone, and today he is the central figure of the human race. I'm well within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, all the navies that ever sailed, all the parliaments that ever sat, all the kings that ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man on this earth as much as that one solitary life. And then I just added this commentary in the book. If there was no resurrection, how could this life be the most influential life of all time? We don't have enough faith to believe that this one solitary life rose from a remote ancient village and was the most influential life of all time unless the resurrection really happened.
Great. Okay, I think that we are... Okay. Well, I think we're almost out of time, but can you just, both of you, just give like in 1 or 2 minutes if you had 1 or 2 minutes left in your life, what do you want to say to all these beautiful Danes? And it's good to say something bad about Sweden, but we don't have time for that. But if you just can say something in 1 or 2 minutes to the Danes here and the people here that they should know when it comes either to apologetics or just what you want to say. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I would just read, I'll start and Frank will finish up. Jude chapter 1, verse 3. I would urge you, brothers and sisters, to earnestly contend for the faith once and for all entrusted to the saints. Defend the faith. Do it with your actions and do it with your knowledge. Do it with what you know. And know what the Scripture says. In fact, we are actually commanded to defend the faith. We are commanded to defend the faith. We're commanded to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So let me encourage you, let me exhort you, let me plead with you as my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ that are dearly loved to defend the faith and love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself, for these two are the greatest commandments. And this is how they will know that you are my disciples. Your love for one another. Love each other as Christ has loved you. Love one another. And that's how the world will see that you are Christ's disciples. In addition to that, know what you believe and why you believe it. And find the answers either through our book or through other books. There's a lot of great resources out there, but this is a great place to start. And I want to thank you for having us and thank you for hosting us. You have a wonderful country.
Mm-hmm. One thing.
Just 2 minutes.
Okay. Make sure that you brush and floss every day. My mom told me. You know, the most important rule we have in our house, I have 3 sons, they're older now, but the most important rule, you only need one rule in the house. This is it. I tell my sons this: don't break your mother's heart. If you break your mother's heart, I will crush you. Now, what does that mean if you don't break your mother's heart? That means you love God, you love one another, and you especially love her. That's all that needs to be said in a house. Because look, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So take care of mama. Love God and love mama.
Right. Again, thank you so much, guys, for being here and just answering questions and so on. And can we just give them a huge hand again for... Just some quick information. You can buy the book for 200 crowns out in the cafe. So it's cheap.
There's DVDs out there.
There's also DVDs out there. You can see the price out there. But 200 crowns for this book. And Frank will, of course, also sign it if you want to. If you want Ted to sign it, you just ask. If you want me to sign it, you also just ask. He will sign it also. 200 crowns in the cafe.
And by the way, the DVDs are 7 hours of teaching through the entire book using PowerPoint, live before an audience, Q&A. So if you really want to teach this stuff or learn more about it, then get the DVD set.
Yes. And tomorrow, as you already know, there's going to be a debate on Pelgrimation. It's going to start at 7:30, but be there in like 2 hours before if you want to get a good seat. Okay? It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And we're looking forward to see how God is going to use Frank tomorrow. So, thank you.
Yeah.
That's everything. Yeah.
Thank you.